So the first batch of GenXers are set to retire in under 10 years. Can you believe that? So
if there isn't something that makes you feel old, then that definitely will
that
make you feel
does.
old.
All the mall rats are getting old. And so our question to you is, if you're set to retire in 10 years, will you be prepared for retirement? If you're a Gen Xer, will you be prepared to retire in 10 years?
Right. That's a very scary question if you're not ready to retire, right? I mean, it's just...
And as a community, as a generation, we're not ready to retire. What's scary is that when we recorded episode 13 of the Queer Money podcast with David Ray nearly 5 years ago, we had the same discussion.
Right.
And the discussion was kind of depressing at that time. 5 years later, it's even more depressing.
Because we haven't made a fucking inch of progress as a generation.
No. And what's concerning to me, or what's confusing to me, is people constantly tell us, and the data constantly tells us, that people are scared about retirement. They're afraid, and they know what the problems are in their preparation for retirement. But 5 years later, the evidence suggests that we're not doing anything about it. One of the most common questions that we get through direct messages, social media, and in email are typically from gay men who are boomers, and their question to us is, how do I retire tomorrow when I have got nothing saved for retirement today?
And to be honest, there are some of them that say, I'd like to retire in the next 5 years, but I've only got $25,000 saved. What do I do, or how can I? And although it's not impossible to be able to transition into a form of retirement, it's really hard.
It is really hard, and your options of your retirement options are limited.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of us think of retirement means I'm not going to ever work again, and I'm going to be able to, especially as gay men, I'm going to be able to retire in a gay village, and it'll be like my own version of Golden Girls, but girls is spelled with a Z at the end instead of an S. But a lot of us aren't really going to have that available to us. A lot of boomers don't currently have that available to them, and Gen Xers are looking a lot more scary. One of the problems that boomers have had heading into retirement is that they were accumulating more and more mortgage debt because they, for whatever reason, they felt like now that they're about to retire, now is the time to buy a 3,000 square foot brand new house. And so they were accruing more mortgage debt. And we said at that time, 5 years ago, that that's not a recipe for success, and that's something that the Gen Xers should avoid. Well, no one listened to us, because now we're not only are we heading into retirement in less than 10 years with record mortgage debt, we're heading in with record credit card debt, student loan debt, and auto loan debt.
Yeah, it is surprising that with the scare of what happened in 2008 with the market, and so many people during that time period talking about how their investments and their prospects of retirement had changed because of the drop in the market. Mm-hmm. And although it did recover, right? It recovered within 9 months that had recovered. And the same thing happened again in 2020, the drop off in the market and the pick back up. We haven't, as a generation, and even as a U.S. consumer, we haven't really learned a whole lot about how we get better prepared for those kinds of things and not have them be a major impact on us.
Yeah, and so the data suggests that most of our earned income is going to not only pay for consuming, but it's also going to pay for our reoccurring high interest payments, whether that's credit card or a phone payment or your reoccurring bill for Netflix. All of our money is going towards those things, and it's not going towards savings and investing. It's not going toward retirement. The median household retirement savings for Gen Xers is $64,000. I mean, I wouldn't even think about retiring in 10 years if we only had $64,000 saved for retirement today.
Right. Well, and think about that. Let's just say you're in the lowest tax bracket, 10%. You retire and you're in the lowest tax bracket. How long is $64,000 going to last you, right? Based on your current spending, how long would $64,000 last you?
Well, if you use the 4% rule.
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't use the 4% rule, if you just had to if you were going to spend all of it, would you even be able to live for a year? Because $64,000, take away 10% taxes at the federal level, then probably you're going to pay some sort of state taxes. You're probably looking at having about somewhere between $55,000 and $58,000 at most. Would you be able to live out the rest of your retirement with that amount of money? Probably not.
Probably
right?
not. And what's even scarier is that 27% of us have less than $50,000 saved for retirement.
Yeah. That is really scary. It's a good question to ask yourself. Based on how much money I have today, how long would I be able to make it in retirement? And as you mentioned, the 4% rule, 4% of $64,000, you're talking about around $2,500. You're talking about less than $200 a month, right? That's really tough. That's really, really tough to live on that kind of money. Even if you are getting Social Security, I think the average amount people get from Social Security today is around $1,300 to $1,400. Add $200 and $250 on top of that, and you're still looking at bringing home less than $1,600. How long is that going to last you?
Ouch. Well, the scary thing too is that 81% of GenXers don't believe that Social Security is going to be there for them when we retire. So it's almost like that's a non-entity for us, but we're not really doing anything about it. And that's that's a disconnect that I have. Is poll after poll, study after study, anecdotal evidence constantly shows us that retirement is our biggest concern. And it's the same thing for the LGBT community. That's one of the leading concerns over and over and over that we get. But people simply are sticking their head in the sand as if it's a non-issue. And I used to think that many of us just assumed that the government, was going to take care of us. But 81% of us are saying that we don't think that's going to happen. So what do people think is going to happen?
I guess they plan on working straight through retirement, right?
Well, I don't want to do that.
No, I definitely don't want to. I'd like to be able to retire. And what's interesting is at some point, mentally and physically, we have to retire, right? Our bodies start to give out. We start to slow down. We start to be less effective at work. And whether we choose to retire or somebody decides to retire
Here you go,
us,
old man, it's time to leave.
right? And you don't get a whole lot when you retire. I mean, it's not like in days of yore, right?
I love yore.
He uses that word all the time. It's not like in days of yore where they hand you a
fat pension and a gold watch.
A gold watch, and here's $45,000 a year for the rest of your life. They're like, here is your pink slip. Have a nice fucking rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is. My father lost his job when he was 52, I think it was. He had worked I can't remember exactly what age he was. I think he was in his late 50s now I think about it. But he had worked for the same company for 31 years, and they gave him 2 weeks. Asshole company. 2 weeks for that 31 years of service when he was laid off. And he was laid off because his company was merging with a bigger company, and they were just getting rid of people, and
it's a numbers game to them.
Right.
Well, but your parents also were part of the boomer generation who bought a gigantic house, brand new, for no reason at all.
Yeah.
So they kind of almost made their situation a little worse. So what is the biggest inhibitor to Gen Xers preparing adequately for retirement? Well, the data suggests, and as we've alluded to earlier, it's high amounts of debt, all sorts of debt, credit card, auto, mortgage, all of that. And we know that credit card debt is likely the highest, or the debt of theirs that has the highest cost to it, the highest interest rate.
Yeah.
The average Gen Xer, not the household, but individual, has $7,718 on credit card debt. Now, that's over $15,000 if you're looking at a per household level.
Right.
And David crunched the numbers earlier. That means that the average Gen X household, 2 Gen Xers under one roof, are paying about $2,500 a year to subsidize that $15,000 in credit card debt.
Right. So if you have, let's just say you have $15,000 in household credit card debt, and you're paying an average interest rate, which is around 17%. There's a lot of folks who pay a lot more than that, but if you're paying that 17%, then you're coming up with that $2,500 a year that you're paying in interest. Let's just look back 10 years, right? had you done something 10 years ago and paid off your debt and put that $2,500 a year into a retirement account.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. And you got a 7%, which is an average, an average return. You got a 7% return. You'd have an additional $36,000 in your retirement account.
Oh, just over the last 10 years.
Just over
which would compound exponentially from now on.
Right. And if you had put it into the S&P 500, just an index fund of the S&P 500, that return was averaging over 14% a year, which means you would have well over an additional $50,000 of retirement money in your account. And that right there is an indication that we are spending so much money as a country, as a community, as individuals. We're spending so much money of our future retirement subsidizing the purchases that we've made. I like to say this over and over again, that our purchases on credit card, especially consumer debt, credit card debt, is anchoring our future earnings to the past. We've already purchased that dinner that we had. We've already purchased that vacation. We've already purchased the clothing that is now worn out. But we're paying for that years in advance, or years from now, right? Or we're paying now what we used way long time ago, and that means we don't have the money today to be able to invest in our future.
Every single video we do, David makes some extra noise because his hands don't stop moving. If there's one glimmer of hope, it is the fact that, or the suggestion that 45% of GenXers say that paying down debt of all sorts is their top priority. The concern, though, is that is something that keeps coming up year after year after year, but the numbers in the debt situation don't really get any better. So on episode 13 of the Queer Money Podcast, titled 5 Money Steps Queer Gen Xers Must Take, we talk again with financial advisor David Ray about 5 steps all Generation Xers should take.
Easy for you to say.
Gen Xers should take for retirement, and that was 5 years ago. We listened to that again, and all of that still applies. But we have a new number one step for Gen Xers to take, especially LGBT individuals who are in a more precarious position for several reasons that we've talked about ad nauseum on this follow-up series and on the Queer Money Podcast. Our number one tip is to pay off that debt ASAP, and the number one debt to focus on is the high interest rate credit card debt, because that is the biggest inhibitor to you not only preparing for a retirement, but to start saving and investing effectively for retirement. And the number one fastest way to pay off credit card debt is with the credit card payoff plan that's now helped people pay off over $400,000 in credit card debt in just the last 2 years. And you can sign up for that plan at debtfreeguys.com/debtfree2021.
Yeah. I would encourage you, especially as queer folks, to think about what you want your retirement to look like, and to remember that the costs associated with retirement for us as queer folks is likely to be higher than the rest of the population. When you look at the number of retirement communities that are exclusively for LGBT folks, and I think all of us would love to live in one of those, it is staggeringly expensive, and there's so few of them. That's why it's so expensive. It's because there are so few of them.
Supply demand.
Right, exactly. And so if you want to have that retirement of your dreams,
the Golden Girls,
don't just dream about it. Actually do something about it. And as John mentioned, the first step is being able to clear away some money in your budget so that you can start investing for retirement. And the biggest and the easiest way to clear that away is to start paying that debt down, because you will immediately then no longer be sending money off to the banks and to the credit card companies. You'll be sending it to an investing firm so that you have growth for the future, or you'll be able to up the amount of money you're putting into your employer-sponsored retirement plan.
Right. So pay down the suck so you can go up. So on tomorrow's Queer Money Follow-Up, we're going to cover episode 14 of the Queer Money Podcast, and that is titled "The Trip That's Changing the Face of AIDS in Africa." This is actually a very inspiring podcast that we actually converted to an article that we wrote for Forbes, and we got indirect feedback from Deepak Chopra that he was very impressed with it. So you want to come and join us for that. So thank you for joining us for another episode of Queer Money Follow-Up. Here's your Queer Money takeaway from this episode. Sign up for the credit card payoff plan at debtfreeguys.com/debtfree2021.
Up there.
Then let us know in the comments below whether or not you are set to retire in 10 years.
Will you be able to retire in 10 years?
Yeah, we will be, and hopefully you will be too. Then give this video a thumbs up. We would appreciate that. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Continue the conversation below, as we said, or in the Queer Money Facebook group. And then also subscribe to the Queer Money podcast at debtfreeguys.com/QM. Thank you, and we will see you tomorrow.